What you are about to see is a real-life story. The accounts have gone into great detail to give each side's version of this an exclusive one, we understand. One of the most talked about.
Hello. Welcome to PiFi number 92. Welcome to Ashton Forbes. How are you, Ashton?
Doing great, Tony. How are you guys doing tonight?
Good. Thank you for coming. And also thank Alexei and Patrick, who've been on the show many times. They provide mental and moral support on a regular basis. And so anyway, I just wanted to kind of, I don't even know where to start, Ashton. To be honest with you, I don't know you that well, and that was one reason why I wanted you to come on the show, because we can always get to know each other better when we're talking to each other like this. And this show is really a casual show. We love to have fun. We love to have, casual conversation and hopefully learn things about each other. And that's kind of what I wanted to do tonight. I think what I try to do on my show is try to show the personal side of people, their history, their education, where they got or how they got to where they are now. Sometimes helps people understand, our motives and our thoughts and where we're trying to go. So if it's okay with Patrick and Alexei, I'd like to give you the stage just for a minute, if you don't mind, and just tell us a little bit about your background and your history and what you do for a living. I don't even know what you do for a living. That's sad, isn't it?
No, that's fine. Yeah, I guess I'm new on this, UFOlogy scene, if you want to call it that. I guess technically I consider myself part of the UFO community, but I'm more UFO adjacent, and that's just the nature of what I've been investigating. So for the last 6 months, since August of last year, I have been, I guess you could say, advocating, investigating, reporting on 2 videos that have reemerged on social media related to MH370, Malaysian Airlines Flight 370, the plane that went missing. I'm a normal guy. I've got a normal job. What I've worked on my entire life is healthcare IT. I'm a consultant, contractor, however you want to refer to me. The way that I refer to my job title is database architect. So I work with computers and doctors and nurses to set up workflows to fit within the computer system. And I'm currently a government contractor related to that job. Can't go into too much more depth on it just because I don't have any kind of media clearance to talk about stuff like that. But that I think that if those skills translate over to what I've been doing now, it's from the analytical perspective. I always consider myself the type of person who appreciates and approaches things from the scientific method, which is developing a hypothesis, then looking at the evidence and trying to match it to that hypothesis and determine if it matches up. And if so, then you have a strong case. And if not, you kind of go back to the drawing board and figure things out. I've been interested in UFOlogy, if you want to call it that, flying, hovering objects, alternative propulsion, advanced technology, that type of thing for about 6 years, ever since those DoD Navy videos were declassified. That's when I first thought, maybe there's something going on here. And I started digging into it. I never saw anything that was real. I've never had an experience in terms of seeing a UFO. I never have seen any non-human intelligent beings or anything like that. And then in terms of even videos out there, I'd never seen anything that compelled me to the level of degree as these videos did 6 months ago. And when I saw them, I think that it was kind of a culmination of all of the stuff that I had learned to date that kind of fit together in terms of realizing these videos could potentially be authentic, from seeing those FLIR footage, knowing what a drone footage looked like, seeing the picture of the Trump satellite leak that he posted on Twitter a few years ago, knowing what I know about science, the double slit experiment, papers related to humanly traversable wormholes and unified field theory, and then stuff like even AI in terms of understanding how far we've progressed from a computer standpoint. And that's why I've chosen to be this, what I call myself is just a citizen journalist. It's just a title, right, that is made up. But somebody who is trying to advocate for advanced technology that has been kept classified and hidden from us, that has the ability to change our entire planet.
So the part
How's that?
That was great. I'm trying to wrap my head around all that. The part that you can't talk about is interesting. That's always an interesting thing to me for some reason. What is the portion of your work that you can't? I mean, obviously, you can't talk about it. But what is it? What is it related to again?
Mostly related to not getting fired. No, in reality, it's I'm in healthcare IT, so I don't have any secret information that I'm holding back. Certainly nothing related to the topic at hand about advanced technology and stuff like that. It's more of a matter of just trying to be extra careful about making sure I don't, violate any media policy around talking about my job or the nature of the contract that I'm working on. So I'm not trying to be dodgy about those types of questions. It's literally a matter of that I'm a normal guy and I like my job, and I haven't profited off of this case in any specific way whatsoever. None of the podcasts have paid me or anything like that. I'm not promoting any books or any content or anything like that as well. I have a YouTube channel that's technically monetized and my Twitter account's monetized, but that's just related to the thoughts that I put out there and stuff like that, not necessarily related to, profiting off of MH370 tragedy, which I think that it is.
Well, I just want to say real quick, so you're working in health. It seems like health professionals aren't really supposed to be giving away client data anyway, right? So I mean, it makes sense to me.
I guess those are HIPAA laws or whatever.
And this wouldn't be HIPAA related. Like, so HIPAA, from respect to HIPAA, the Health Information Portability and Accountability Act, people usually spell it wrong, but it's HIPAA, is really have to do with not accessing private records without having a reason in order to do so, right? And so it's not necessarily related to that. It's just related to, my actual company that I work for. In order to talk about the company at all or about what the nature of your job in any specific setting, you have to get express written approval from them. And I did get approval to talk about, the MH370 stuff because I am a government contractor. So I wanted to make sure that, I was covered from that perspective. And they said that, as long as I don't broach on, specific stuff related to my job, they don't want me to say something that could impact the project or any, information around the project in general, because the reality is, like, it is a contract that is with the government in general. So, yeah.
I'm almost afraid. I'm almost afraid to ask this question, but because it doesn't really matter to me. But I'm just curious about your education background.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you seem like a smart guy, so sometimes I'm just curious about, you know what I mean, that kind of thing.
Real quick, what I can say about my job is that I've been in healthcare because after I graduated college, I've done basically the same job ever since. It's been almost 20 years, 18, 19 years, something like that. And I just do it because I want to help people. I've always looked at healthcare and thought that it's kind of a scam in the United States, especially insured, self-insured, they call them. They end up paying way more than people that are insured. And there's many layers I could go into. It's not necessarily the topic of this particular conversation. With respect to my education, I have a bachelor's of science and business administration, BSBA. So I'm technically a business school major. I majored in marketing, finance, and international business. And if that sounds impressive, it's not that impressive. You just take classes that kind of like cross all those different boundaries, and they give you several majors. But I am kind of proud of doing the business major aspect. I always thought that business and economics are really where my passion lies, as well as science in general. But that, I like the idea of the science of common sense is what I would call economics and business, right? And that's why I got into it. I would have never imagined when I was in college that I would be talking today about stuff like this and advanced science, and now getting really interested in electrical engineering. But that's where we're at.
That's awesome.
Did your interest in electrical engineering come from the last 6 years of studying UFOs and UAPs kind of thing?
Not even last 6 months, honestly. I was actually, physics was the science that I think I liked the most, just because I would consider from a kindred spirit perspective, I would consider myself like a theoretical physics mindset, where I'm not big on the math and the numbers, but I love the concepts of like, what's the nature of our universe? Like, why do things from the microscopic or quantum level act differently than things from the macroscopic level, general relativity, and thinking about stuff like that. The electrical engineering aspect has actually come up with regards to the case in general, where now my mindset has gone that I think that anyone who's really interested in science and understanding the secrets of the universe should look at electrical engineering, from magnetism, electricity, and gravity. You know, I think in the relationship between those, and what they call like the scalar potential, I think that that's where the secret of all of this stuff, floating crafts, gravity manipulation, comes down to. And that's why I've been, I'm not on a daily basis, but every few days I do a stream where I just dig into the science with the viewers. We watch YouTube channels, look at scientific papers, etc. Try to catch up on that.
You know, it's funny. I'm a design build contractor, and I've been for about 45 years now. And it's funny to me every time I think about the theories behind, you know, just electrical currents, how complicated it can be versus the people that work in the construction industry, right? Like we go out, we run wires every day, you know, we're doing the work when we get it inspected and it passes. But most of those, I mean, I'm trying not to be offensive here, but most people don't have that clear of an understanding about how electricity even works and the theories behind it, right? And it's amazing to me. I don't know why I find it fascinating that so many people could be in the industry, but just have a very fundamental understanding of how it works. And
yeah, that's what I've learned too, you know. And I think one just quick anecdote, video that I looked at, which I think kind of changed my perspective, was it's a little bit of a thought experiment, but I believe it checks out experimentally as well. Is that if you were to make a circuit, you know, with a switch and then a light bulb, and that light bulb is right in front of you, that switch is right in front of you as well, maybe a foot away, and you were to extend copper wires that go all the way around the entire planet and then connect again, and then you were to flip that switch, how fast would that light bulb turn on? The answer is it turns on instantly. Now you
right,
think about that and you go, wait a minute, what? Shouldn't there be a delay if the energy is going through the wires all the way around the planet coming back? The answer is no, it flips on right away. And why does it do that? And I think that thought experiment really illuminates the idea of, do we really understand electricity the way that it really is functioning? Or is it a little bit more interesting than we would imagine on its surface?
a lot of the energy is carried in the magnetic or the electromagnetic field around the wires, right? So I've seen that same thought experiment, and it's pretty amazing, actually. I mean, we still can't, you know, we still can cut the circuit halfway around the world and not get it to work, but it is amazing, and that's kind of what I was alluding to, how just those how diverse nature is. And you know what I mean, how we every day we deal with like the simple things, but we don't really understand what's what's behind them. Now Patrick may understand it better, but
Well, my conception of electricity is so rudimentary. It blows my mind constantly. I was going to say one of the things that's incredibly interesting finding lately is some of Michael Levin's work on cell morphogenesis and morphology, and the role of electricity in literally designing like tadpole faces. So he calls it the electric face, and you can look this up online. You can see how electricity essentially dictates how a tadpole's face will come into being, and how the cell morphology and the arrangement of organs and the whole overall shape of the organism itself is heavily dictated by electricity, not just DNA. Like electricity and DNA are both working in tandem at such levels that we're just starting to scratch the surface of this. It's really cool feeling.
Patrick, have you seen his work on some morphogenetic spaces? Is basically what you're talking about there, but
Yeah.
on how cancer is basically related to cells becoming disconnected magnetically from the bigger system.
Right. Yeah, he's mentioned that briefly, and I should have taken better notes on it. I have a lot of hope for that, as well as in combination with AI.
I like that guy. I think he does great work, Michael Levin. Yeah,
he's probably like people are saying he's one of the most important people living on the planet today, and I think it's because he's doing such groundbreaking work in the field of biology. he's showing us ways that we can essentially regenerate organs and massively push the field of biology and human longevity ahead as well. Incredible research.
I guess this is why I'm a bad host. My mind wanders so far out of the bounds of the conversation sometimes. I guess, to be honest, before I even knew who you were, Ashton, and I saw the whole controversy, my first thoughts were, oh, please don't put these poor people through this. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? So my desire was that for the video to be fake. That was again, this has nothing. I didn't even know who you were or who was pushing or who was behind. You know what I mean? I didn't know anything about it. I'm being honest about my first impressions of this whole thing, the whole story. So my first desire was that it to be fake and that it wouldn't last long and that it would go away and that these families wouldn't have this hope of possibly their families being alive someplace. You know what I mean? Just the whole, what are the families going through? And that's just where I'm coming from. So I don't know if you have any response to that, but did you have other people kind of wanting, or did you ever have the thought that you really just wanted it to be fake? Where, you know what I mean? Where, I mean,
Yeah.
your stance is that the video is real, obviously. So I didn't know I didn't know if you'd ever kind of sort of falsified it in your mind.
So, I mean, I think that's what the government and the media would love for you to think, right? Is don't look at this, let this go, right? And then what I would ask you is, do you think the families think that they have closure? Like, do you think that they've gotten answers that are adequate? That would be my follow-up.
I think at some point because I have had my brother was killed by in an incident about 12 years ago, and I never learned the exact the reason, and some of it's been kept from me, and but at some point you get closure just because of time. Like after a certain amount of time, you say, okay, I've dealt with it, I've mourned, I've grieved, I'm gonna, I got to move on. And then to have new information or something comes up, it just kind of reopens the wounds, a little bit. So it's not that I don't want to have. At some point, you think you do have closure, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then it possibly new information comes up and it gets reopened all over again. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
No, and I'm sorry to hear about your brother. I think that's terrible. I mean, I think that from my perspective, and it wasn't kind of a gotcha question, but the reality is, as part of the investigation, one of the things that we've found out is that the family members never believed these narratives that are out there. They never believed this plane crashed in the South Indian Ocean. They never believed that it was a pilot suicide. You've got Sarah, who is the girlfriend of Philip Wood, the adult American passenger, who was on CNN over a month after this plane went missing, saying that the plane was taken and that she didn't believe any of the official narratives are out there. You've got Danica Weeks, who is the wife of Paul Weeks, I believe his name was. He was an engineer, and she basically has gone dark. And I had a story where she had been doing some of those internet dating, and some guy apparently had matched with her, and he emailed me and said that he had matched with her, and that all of a sudden, out of nowhere, she had opened up to him about the situation, who she was and everything. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, she just says, there's people watching me, I have to go. And then she never contacted him ever again. So the reality is, if it was me, it wouldn't matter if it was 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 50 years. If there was still, like you said, some hope, or even just for getting the truth, I would always want it for sure. As to the idea of respecting the families, absolutely. I think that the main thing related to this case is trying to get the truth for the families, not just the families, but the witnesses who have been discredited. Some of them had their entire lives ruined just for having seen the plane and their stories being contraindicated or contraindicating the narratives that are out there. For the pilots who've been vilified in the media as terrorists and saying all these lies that have come out about the one pilot, but supposedly being depressed. I think there was even some kind of weird accusation about like some dark stuff that one of the pilots might be into. And then as well for the potential leaker, who we actually think we've identified the person who leaked these videos and went to prison for 6 years on a 9-year sentence. So to me, it's about trying to vindicate all of those people. But then, as sad as this is to say, that the technology and what we see in these videos is so much bigger than that and has the ability to really change the circumstances of really billions of people on this planet. And so that's why it's such a huge crossroads in terms of trying to do what's right to get the truth out, but at the same time, really understanding the implications of these videos potentially being real and what it means for us as an entire human race.
I agree with that for sure too. I mean, whether or not the video is real or not, the technologies that we've been working on behind the scenes definitely have the potential of changing like the entire nature of the planet and how we interact with each other, and the potentiality of the human experience to begin with.
I was gonna say, and what you guys were mentioning too, in terms of like the medical healing stuff as well, like that's certainly an avenue of this type of technology as well, is understanding the nature of why we've evolved to be humans the way that we are, as we see here now. Is it related to the underlying framework of the cosmos and potentially electricity and magnetism? Even Bob Greenyer said the secret's in your face, in terms of the symmetry and the shapes that we have in our face, which went really pretty much hand in hand with what Patrick was just stating a second ago as well. Now, I try not to delve too much into that because I think it's really important to keep this type of stuff segmented. Same reason why I try not to dig into other conspiracies that may be linked to this as well. Because I'm trying to keep it as grounded as you can when you're talking about a plane like literally disappearing out of the sky in 2 videos. But I do think that you do have to kind of have a broader discussion to some point about what's the nature of our reality.
Whenever I was looking at this, again, I honestly had not heard of you yet. For some reason, I saw the rigmarole on X before I found out who you were. I don't know how that's possible, but you're the main character. But I had done some research on, ChatGPT, and the things about the pilots turn out right. He was a 13-year veteran, no history of any problems at all. The only thing I found was that the satellite that's actually quoted only had this is the stance, the official stance, right? Only had a handshake, a digital handshake. It didn't have video capabilities. So that confused me a little bit. What do you say about that? Is that the official stance or the official?
So I mean, when we're talking about the satellites, we're really talking about these Inmarsat satellites. So they're a group of geostationary satellites around the Earth that are pinging these airplanes. And there are 2 that are relevant for this case. One is called POR, which is, I believe, in the Pacific region over Japan, and one called IOR, which is over the Indian Ocean. And one interesting fact about the plane is that before it took off, it stopped connecting to the POR satellite. And while it's on the ground waiting for people to board at roughly 1600 UTC, and it takes off at 1630 UTC is when it pulls back, and it only pings the IOR satellite from that point until its supposed fuel exhaustion in the South Indian Ocean. Now, why is this odd? Because in the previous flights, it's pinged back and forth between those 2 satellites. It's in range of both of them. And it's flying to the northeast towards the POR satellite for about 40 minutes. And it never pings that satellite ever again. I think that some people have speculated, some of the investigators, that there might be some level of espionage at play here where somebody messed with the computer to get it to not ping that other satellite. It's very unusual that it would not ping it at all. Why is this important? Because if you have 2 satellites that are pinging down the airplane, you can triangulate the position of the plane. If you only have one, this is what happens where we figure out that it's potentially on an arc, because we only have one. So we don't know exactly. We know supposedly the distance from the satellite, but we don't know the exact position. But if you have 2 different distances, this is how you could triangulate the position of the plane. My official stance, if I have to go on the record here, is that the Inmarsat data is either spoofed, falsified, or misinterpreted after 1840 UTC. Before that, the data seems to line up with the radar information. Plane is going northeast towards Beijing to the South China Sea. Plane goes dark at 1721 UTC, 2 minutes after we get the final public communication that good night Malaysian Airlines Flight 370. Then the plane turns back around. Malaysia lies about this for about 5 days, and then they say, "Oh, we're searching the South China Sea. Everybody's thinking it must be near Vietnam or something like that, near going towards Beijing to the northeast." A few days later, they go, "Oh, yeah, we were tracking it on military radar the whole time. Actually, it turned around, went back over the country, and went out to the Straits of Malacca and the Andaman Sea. Oh, and it went directly towards Penang, the closest airport you would go to in an emergency situation." It's like, oh, well, that could have been useful information, the next day, the same day, as opposed to waiting days on. Like, why would they do that? And then supposedly makes a turn as well and goes, into the Straits of Malacca, the Andaman Sea, and the Nicobar Islands. So now it's going northwest. And what's important about this is that there are Cope Tiger and Cobra Gold exercises going on between the United States and Thailand in the area, where they're going to have their most advanced equipment there. There's no chance they're not tracking a Rogue 777 flying directly past their exercises. And there should be several other countries whose radar picked this plane up. Thailand should have come in and said something about it. They definitely would have been able to track it. You've got India, who has military bases, joint military bases with the United States, Card Nicobar and Port Blair. You've got Indonesia, where this plane literally just wraps around their entire country. Definitely should have been able to see the plane. And then if it really did go to the South Indian Ocean, which is where they say at the Nicobar Islands, it then makes a turn, about I think 200-degree turn towards the south, and then flies down in the South Indian Ocean for like 5 hours. Why did Indonesia not pick it up and see it, right? And then when it's down there by Australia, where they say that it ran out of fuel and sank into the water, or whatever the narrative is, that why did the Jorn system from Australia, which is a very advanced radar system, how do they not see it either, right? So to me, the problem with the Inmarsat data after 1840s, there's no evidence for it. If that Inmarsat data is correct, why didn't we find the plane? We had the largest, most expensive search in history, searched with, I hope I don't have these numbers backwards, 42 planes and 39 boats from over a dozen different countries. Searched everywhere above water along the 7th arc, and below water. We searched with submersible submarines that can scan the bottom of the ocean as well. They didn't find one piece of the plane, not one single piece. We found out with that Titan sub that popped, about 6 months ago, maybe a little bit longer, that the United States government has a system called SOSUS, which is able to detect acoustic detections of even a tiny sub imploding. Not just detect it, but they pinpointed its location. So why didn't we detect a 777 crashing into the ocean? There's actually 2 hydrophone systems in addition to that, one in Diego Garcia and another one off the coast of Western Australia. Both of these should have been able to detect the acoustic detection of a plane the size of a city block crashing into the ocean. The debris field alone.
Tsunami warning, aren't those like for tsunami warnings or something? Some of the...
They may serve as that as well. I don't know what their the hydrophone official purpose is, but definitely hearing acoustic detections of planes crashing into the ocean is something they should be able to accomplish.
Yeah.
There's no big debris field. Like this debris field from a plane this size. I was talking to Mike Exner from the Independent Group, and he says that this plane crashed and broke into 1,000 pieces. And I would say probably thousands of pieces if it's crashing. Most of this debris would have floated. Planes are made of plastics, and you've got luggage, you've got the inflatable devices of each seat, the bodies, all this stuff's going to float, and it's going to spread out. It's going to be a debris field miles wide. It's going to be impossible to miss from satellite. And we've got very advanced satellites, which were proven even going back to the Bin Laden raid years earlier, where we're literally watching people move around on the surface of the planet, and we can't see a debris field miles wide. The reality is, if this plane crashed into the ocean, the United States government surveillance system should have caught it the very next day. And that should be one of the biggest things I want people to take away from this, is that we know beyond any shadow of a doubt that the United States government knows what happened to this plane, and they're lying about it. They've got military bases in Diego Garcia, a signals intelligence base in Coco Islands, right past where this plane supposedly flew by. And they've got the Pine Gap base in Australia as well that have advanced radar, and part of Space Force is located at these places, where they should have been able to track the plane from takeoff to wherever it ended up. in addition to those exercises that were going on. So there's no chance they didn't see it. I mean, if we had amateurs basically looking at commercial radar or commercial satellite images, and they couldn't find anything either. Several people claim they see debris, but scale doesn't match up. One of them was like featured on the Netflix documentary, I think, about it. They looked in all these places, found nothing as well. And the military radar is going to be significantly better than this. Or sorry, military satellites significantly better than this. In fact, we found that there was something called the SBIRS system, space-based infrared system produced by Lockheed Martin. Just recently as well, even more information's come out about it. The Wall Street Journal did a video piece about the SBIRS system as well, where not only is it scanning the entire globe persistently every 10 seconds, they also have what they call stairs on these satellites, which can then pinpoint specific locations for even more advanced detailed imagery. And they are also incorporating MEOs and LEOs, which are mid-elliptical orbit satellites, as well as low Earth orbit satellites. And this is part of where people were saying, well, this satellite video can't be a low Earth orbit satellite because those orbits move too quickly. Those satellites move at like 16,000 miles an hour. But if you just think about it logically, this is not 1970 anymore. This is not like the movie Enemy of the State, where you are, looking down through the satellite, although certainly you could do that. If you have a low Earth orbit satellite moving that fast, you're not staring down through the satellite. You're beaming data from that satellite to a computer system that is then taking all the imagery data and piecing it together into a computer program, just like we have with Google Earth, right? Where you can look around the entire planet, except for the difference is it's video and not just a still picture, right? So if you imagine that type of system, which if you're dig into SBIRS, if you want to use AI to have it ask you, you'll find out that it can track airplanes in addition to missile warning, which is its primary declassified purpose. So there's just no chance whatsoever that the United States government doesn't know what happened to this plane. And in my opinion, that the story that's out there, and again, this is a story because the official narrative is they don't know what happened to this plane. Now, people that think that it was a suicidal pilot, they generally will say, well, Malaysia's covering it up, that it was a suicidal pilot. Well, there's another conspiracy, right? So people want to call me a conspiracy theorist. The idea that Malaysia would, for some reason, cover up that it was a suicidal pilot, that also requires some explanation.
Well, the one thing I take away from this is that that data is not just disappearing after they receive it, right? They're storing it in servers. And so if there was something tracking it, then it should be, like you're saying, you can go back and find it. So that data should be somewhere. I'm just going to leave it there.
100%. Yeah. And that's what I call it verifiable data, right? Like we have two videos just for the people who are out there. One of them is called Satellite Video Airliner and UFOs. It's looking down. It's kind of at an angle. It's not directly down like you would imagine from a geostationary satellite. And if that's a SBIRS system that we're looking at there, then that data, someone should be able to go look at the SBIRS system, not necessarily the plane, but this video, but a different video, and confirm that's what that system looks like. Because if it does look like that, then bingo, right? Like we got it. We should also be able to look at the drone video. The drone we've identified as an MQ-1C Gray Eagle because we can actually see the nose of the drone in the video. And it's got a rare configuration where we're seeing a camera on the wing. Now, there are pictures out there that have this exact type of aerial surveillance package on board these MQ-1C Gray Eagles. So someone should be able to go look at other similar video, even though it's classified, but somebody who's got a classified clearance to look at that and confirm that that's what that video looks like. We've even had people say, well, they don't come in that palette color of the rainbow color of the drone and what have you with the HUD data removed. The answer is that's false. They do come in that color. We've proven it several times over that that's actually the original color that they come in, and that the black and white versions are what is an actual variant version of that as well. And that the cameras is literally just a matter of changing the setting in the camera to switch between them. Sorry, go ahead, Tony. I know you're going to ask something.
No, I think you kind of answered the question I had was if it's a geostationary satellite. It does. I've had a hard time wrapping my head around the angles that we're seeing.
Yeah.
And I think the geostationary versus the near Earth orbit thing kind of answered that for me as far as what makes sense. I still don't understand the angles necessarily. So as far as you're concerned, what is taking the video of when it comes to the point where the plane disappears.
Yeah.
What
So
video-
there's two again. So the first one, let's start with the drone. It's easier to understand because you can actually see the drone nose in the video, and it's this blue, black, thermal layer that we see. What we can see is the very color differences in it. And so we are fairly certain it's an MQ-1C Gray Eagle. The problem is the bodies of those drones are the same between a couple different versions, including the MQ-9, which is a more advanced, a little more capable drone. So we're not 100% sure, but the MQ-9, we can only find Gorgon Stare loadouts, which are these big, bulky cameras that they have underneath the wings that are for staring down at the Earth, as opposed to aerial surveillance, which are the straight ahead ones that we see. So that's why we believe that the first one, the drone one, is MQ-9. Now, with respect to the satellite, again, I think what we're looking at here is something called Sentient, which is a advanced AI that was declassified in 2012. That is what they use to operationalize the satellite systems, such as SBIRS, the space-based infrared system. Now, because it's not necessarily staring down through a satellite, and that it's pulling the data from the satellites in a constellation using signals intelligence, beaming this information between one asset to the next, sending the data down to like the spy planes, like the Poseidon P8 or the Ares EP32, that the angle no longer really matters because it's coming from a computer program that's pulling data, even potentially from multiple sources, to create that video playback. And they may even have the capability of being 3D. The first version that is on Regicide Anand's account is actually a side-by-side stereoscopic 3D version. Now, the skeptics have said, oh, this is some functionality that YouTube had back in the day that they don't have anymore, that we can't even recreate anymore. But, I don't know for sure. What I can say is that USA 229, which is a NOS naval ocean surveillance satellite, was right over the Nicobar Islands at 1840 UTC, staring down at the exact location where this plane would have turned in the South Indian Ocean. So, and it has a sister satellite right next to it in outer space that's on the same orbital trajectory as it is. So if it is 3D stereoscopic, then we have the low Earth orbit satellite that's there. And if it's not, we still have the satellite that's there at that moment. And then in terms of the angle that you're seeing there, this could be computer generated for perspective purposes. Because you can imagine that the purpose of a system like this is to track these objects. One of the stated purposes of SBIRS is battlefield awareness. So we can also tell that the drone is cropped out in the satellite video just off the screen, which gives us some intention of the person that would have leaked this video, is that they're not trying to damage national intelligence, right? They might be other assets they cropped out as well, but it just turns out these are the two videos that were leaked out there. There could be other planes on those videos. We don't really know. But we also know that video is cropped because we see the mouse come in from the side of the screen. So actually, so if you're watching right now, there's this mouse that's coming out the side of the screen where my finger is, and it comes in the screen like this, and then it goes off the screen down over here. And we know that because when we see that mouse go off the side of the screen from both sides, we know that the screen must be bigger than, my perspective is flipped. The screen must be bigger than what we're actually looking at there as well. So all of these things really indicate that what we're looking at here is an actual real video, not just something that somebody hoaxed, because all these details make no sense to hoax in there, including that the mouse that comes onto the screen is at a different frame rate than the background in the satellite video. Not is it just at a different frame rate. The background's at 6 frames per second, which indicates a large field of view computer program that's processing a huge wide screen. But it's also 24 frames per second for the mouse, which is indicative of a Citrix session. So for those people at home or listening right now that work for large companies that have a centralized database that you log into, as far as I know, every single one pretty much uses Citrix. And that's your tunneling system to go from your local terminal to the database itself that could be based wherever, let's say Utah, for example. And so why would somebody who's hoaxing this hoax in a Citrix session into their hoax video and have this whole elaborate scenario of it being cropped? Now, what I want to say, and I'll let you jump in with some more questions, is one thing that was just discovered today is that somebody a few days ago had said, told me to look at the telemetry data, which is when was the data about where the plane specifically was released to the public? And I found out that the satellite data that you were talking about, the Inmarsat data, That was released to the public on May 27th, 2014 on a 47-page report. You can find it through CNN, or if you go look at my Twitter profile from today. Well, the video was published May 19th, 2014, 8 days before that. How would somebody know where the plane was 8 days before the information was publicly available? We can see in the bottom left of the satellite video, there's coordinates. The coordinates shift when the perspective shifts, and the perspective shifts 8 different times in that satellite video. We were able to track that and then map it and figure out that the plane is moving south and to the east in that video because of that. And that's how we were actually able to pinpoint the location of the Nicobar Islands. So to me, this is a smoking gun. I mean, this is, especially if people who think back to the plane going missing, how much obfuscation there was. For days they're searching the South China Sea. Then they're saying, okay, this plane went over to, the Straits of Malacca and the Andaman Sea, and the whole world's going, wait, what? You just said it was in the South China Sea. What are you talking about? And then they're like, well, we don't know now if it went north towards Russia or if it went south towards the South Indian Ocean. And then there's unnamed sources come out and say, well, they now think that because of classified data that it went to the South Indian Ocean. But it wasn't weeks and weeks and weeks later until that data became publicly available for scrutiny. And it wasn't actually that the full unredacted data became public, wasn't until 2017 when it was released from Inmarsat to the Malaysian government / Malaysian Airlines, to one of the family members, and then to the blogger Victor Ilanello, who is one of the independent group experts. So this idea of how somebody would have known exactly what coordinates to put in there when it wasn't even publicly available information, to me screams either this person's a precog, right? They have precognition, they can see the future, they're psychic, or this is just a real video. And how would they know that the plane would never be found? We're approaching the 10-year anniversary next month. The official search didn't find anything. How would this hoaxer know that? Because the moment we find the plane, now these 2 elaborate videos go from being something that are very compelling to your point, now being very damaging to the families of the victims who, were sitting there crying, getting arrested, saying they don't believe the official narratives, etc.
It certainly was botched, the whole investigation. I mean, it's sad. That's one thing that none of this is pointed at you. It lends people, it starts to make people's minds wander, and right, so that we're more vulnerable to something like this anyway. But again, that's not a criticism of you. I'm just saying the fact that it was the investigation has been so botched really supports some kind of conspiracy.
And here's the thing about that is that I think anybody who's interested should go look at the press conferences, because at the time, I don't like to attribute to malice what can be adequately described through incompetence or ignorance, But in this case, I think it was actual malice in terms of cover up. And you can only really understand this through the lens of years later looking back at it. One of the best ones is the Four Corners interview from the Australian journalist who interviewed the Malaysian Minister of Defense. And with the benefit of hindsight, you can tell that this guy is just straight up lying. This is 7 weeks afterwards, and he won't answer a straight question at all, even non-controversial ones like, when did you first hear about the plane going missing? He won't even answer it. And why did you not send up jets to track the plane? Or how did you know that the plane was not hostile? That's just a basic question. Where if I would ask you guys, he says that that plane was unidentified when it went missing, but they were tracking it on military radar, and they knew it was civilian, and they knew it wasn't hostile. And that's why his explanation is for why they didn't send up jets. It's there's only one way I can imagine you would know it's not hostile in that scenario. You have communication with the plane. How else would you know it's not a suicidal pilot or a hijacking scenario, right? You have to have had contact with the plane. And you can understand if these videos are real, why you would have to lie about that. Because if it's a fire scenario, an emergency event where they are going to the closest airport, it completely destroys the narrative that existed at that time, which was that this plane went to the South Indian Ocean. People have a hard enough time believing the plane could be on fire from the moment it went dark to an hour and 20 minutes later, where we think it's disappearing in the Nicobar Islands, let alone another 5 hours of flying in the South Indian Ocean. The fire extinguishing devices on board the plane can actually last for 3 to 4 hours. but they're not going to last for 8 hours, which is what would be required for the narrative that they were pushing.
Did you have a comment, Patrick?
Oh, Patrick, go ahead, sir.
So I've just been looking into this a bit. I've been watching some debunking videos on from visual effects artists. Whenever I see these things, I'm also very
Corridor Crew or a different one. I'm familiar with them all.
It's from Corridor Crew, VFX artist debunk flight MH370 alien abduction.
Yeah, they don't like me very much.
I'm sure. Well, so I used to do a bit of video editing too, and so I'm really I watch for these kind of explosions and the uniqueness of the explosion and how much detail can be gone to it, how symmetrical it is. If it's a really recent one, they're usually not symmetrical at all. They're usually all factors are very well accounted for. I'm watching their video show side-by-side footage of the stock footage that they found for the explosion that we're seeing in the video, and it matches exactly to that. It's just they took out some of the colors and they took out some of the textures, I guess you could say, but it's basically the same. So that leads me to believe what up with that, or why would it be faked?
So I'm going to show you how they lied to you. Is it okay if I share something here?
Yeah.
So unfortunately, the Corridor Crew, I'm not gonna pull any punches. These guys are total idiots, and I'm not even sure they're actually VFX experts. That's the true reality of it. But not just that, they're also liars. And I had already completely debunked every single thing this guy Nico said when I was on the Danny Jones Concrete podcast. They tried to ambush me with a 15-minute video of this guy trying to debunk everything, and every single thing he said was false. And so I wrote down every single thing because I wanted to make sure they weren't going to falsely edit me from that, because I knew it was a hit job interview. And I was able to refute every single thing he said as being false. I made a video about it, which you can find on my YouTube channel, which is at JustXAshton, where before they even released it, because I wanted to make sure I wasn't being edited, they refuted every point he made, including what he thinks is the strongest one, which is actually not even his own debunk. Every single thing he said was just ripped off of the Metabunk website from a guy named Mick West. And that's another part of the thing that's kind of sad, is that this is how misinformation, disinformation spreads. These aren't even original thoughts that the Corridor Crew had. They literally just stole somebody else's. And actually during that video, they even say, oh, and this came from the Pyromania VFX, which is Mick West's debunk that he pushed out there. And they say, and we even have that. And then they go, oh, wait, no, we didn't actually even have that. So, and additionally, one other quote from Nico in that particular video that you are watching is he says it's a perfect match. And then about 5 seconds later, he says, of course, it doesn't have to be a perfect match, right? Which is another contradictory statement. It actually would need to be one. Now, I'm going to share my screen here and show you how the deception works.
Yeah, please do. It looks really convincing to me, they're side by side.
So
yeah,
you can see when you watch it on the Corridor Crew, they've already modified it to make it look the same. And the reality here is that you can see that it's a very similar one, but that it's not actually the same. So from the outside, you can see that it is a similar outline on this.
Wow.
There's extra dots. And then in the middle, you can tell right away that the middle doesn't match at all. And so what they've done is they've looked at them side by side and they edit the one. And now the other thing I want to show you here. So this shows that even on this single frame, it's not a perfect match, although I will admit it's somewhat similar, but you would have to modify it. And so now you'd have to give an explanation for how and why someone modified this, keeping in mind that the person who would have created this and edited this, they wouldn't have had something to compare it to side by side. They would have had to blindly, what you see here with the color, compared to the background here of the black, which is the real thing that we see from the videos. So the deception breaks down when you then show the full VFX. Now, this VFX was actually used in the movie Starship Troopers. And in the movie Starship Troopers, they didn't modify the VFX whatsoever. And so that makes you really question, okay, if Starship Troopers isn't bothering to modify this at all, why is somebody who is supposedly some rogue hoaxer, why are they modifying it? So this is now the VFX overlaid over the actual video here as well. And you can see that first frame that's very similar. And then after that, nothing's even remotely close. So this is really what kind of breaks down the deception of the debunkers that say, oh, well, this one frame's similar, but now you got to explain, well, why does nothing else even match even at all, like remotely close? And how long would it take for someone to move all the pixels around to get it to match, right?
Because they'd have to match every single frame for that to look realistic, and they only clipped one frame.
Yeah, and so that's sorry. And there's one more thing I want to show as well, because people will say, well, okay, it's close enough. I hear that a lot, right? That it's close enough, you know, even though that's not really how any of this works. The reality is Taylor set off blast waves all have this same capability where you can match it to the edge of these blasts and have it be the same. Now, this is somebody who made a version of it where you can see you can do the exact same thing with 3 different blast waves. So this is the first one where you can see that they match here part of the edge, and it actually matches even better than that one. Here's the second one where you can see that they match this as well. And it's just a matter of resizing them, right, to get it to match like this. This one's not that great, but the next one as well, I think, is pretty good. Here it comes. Sorry, this video is kind of long. There you go. So now you can see they take this one as well, and they match it, and you can see that it's quote unquote perfect match on all of these. So usually, if they wanted. Yeah. So usually my argument here is, you know, if somebody's going to add this VFX in there, then we're going to see that full unedited VFX. They're not going to painstakingly move around all the pixels on that. They have nothing to compare it to. The big thing is that this is an original work. It's not like it's something where they're copying that. And that's what, you know, the people like the Corridor crew and other people have all just copied that same debunk and said, oh, well, they just modified it and made it look exactly like something else. That's like me saying, well, I'm going to take this orange and make it look like an apple, right? But the reality is I don't have anything to compare it to, and I don't have a frame of reference. So it would be easy if I'm looking at them 2 side by side, I'm turning one thing into the other. But if I have nothing here to compare it to, and now I'm just randomly changing it, how do I randomly change it from to looking like this to looking like this over here? So that would be my counter to that.
That's amazing. I really appreciate that you had all those videos right on tap too. That's very professional.
They get a lot of views.
Have you overlaid the Starship Troopers image with the VFX that they're like basic? Do you have a video, like a little video of that?
I don't have a clip of that one. I did post it on my YouTube, I want to say a couple of weeks ago, where you can tell that it's the real, it's that same VFX that I was showing. And it's the part where it's like they show one of those videos where it's like the bugs are attacking and they blew up this asteroid or whatever, and then you see the little explosion. And you can tell it's clearly the Pyromania VFX, but it's not modified in any way. It's just shrunken a little bit, and you can see the full blast as well. And so the other thing too is that what we're seeing in these videos is an endothermic event. That's the reason why it's black, right? It's an absorption of energy, which is akin to a black hole, but it's not technically a black hole. And this is too why, if you were faking this, someone would hoax it and fake it as an explosion, as an implosion, an exothermic event, a release of energy, not something that's an absorption of energy that's out there. In fact, even just the science behind getting the videos to look real, which the videos are consistent with both physics and electrical engineering, would require this huge amount of background to understand like how the theoretical physics around it, the electrical engineering around it. These orbs actually converge in the final frames on the plane as well, which is what we think is inducing the singularity. Like, how is anyone coming up with this? And how is anyone coming up with these like gravity engines we see? Go ahead.
Right. So I was noticing that about the orbs as well. A lot of the fake videos that I've seen, there are a lot of easy ways to tell a fake, even in today's advanced technology and graphic engineering. What I saw with the orbs was, well, at least in other videos and in like fantasy movies, you would see the orbs, at least with like a good 10 frames of them going shoo, 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 and then shoo, and then pull. All you see in this is just the orbs, like for about 3 frames, they just go, yeah, and then there's an explosion there. So there's a lot that looks very realistic as far as I can predict something like this to be realistic looking.
Yeah, do you want to pull this up too while you're kind of talking, and you can keep talking while I show this.
See it. Yeah,
because this is the drone. Because I think the drone one is by far the most compelling, because you can see these orbs are really like orbiting the plane in this perfect 120-degree 0-point sinusoidal pattern, meaning it's an equilateral triangle, and you can see these like lines in front of the orbs, which is this gravity engine, for lack of a better term, pulling them forward. You can even see these heat signatures in the orbs that are spinning on their axis here. You can see the shake of the camera actually accurately increases when they zoom in. When they're zoomed in like this, the shake even increases because it's like, if you're tracking something with your camera and you're using that zoom in, it's going to shake even more.
Well, that would be easy to fake, but yeah.
And then here you can see the part where they kind of converge. Now that's really fast. So, and this is part of the original video, by the way, where it actually shows these orbs here and then slow-mo as well. This is built into the original video where they show this slow-mo. I didn't do any of this to do the slow-mo, but there you can actually see the orientation change right here of the orbs. The orientation is flipping right here, which it does right before it gets to the part where now it converges on the plane.
Yeah.
And in the final frame as well, this is very odd. You can see right there, the plane is blurred now in the final frame, and the orbs are now getting flat, which is consistent with gravitational lensing type effect happening here. What we noticed in the
camera shaking too.
Well, there's the thing is we don't see any other blurred frames before that. So you might be able to argue that, but it's like, why is it just blurring just in that final moment? We think that what's happening, and also the plane gets a little bit smaller. It's like it's stretching out a little bit right here. It gets a tiny bit smaller as well. What we really think is happening here is the plane's accelerating in the final frame there. And from the satellite video, do I have the one? Let me see. The satellite video actually at around the same time, the orbs actually slow down, which is a detail that is actually, I think you guys are the first one that I've shown this on, that I reported on this week. There's still people out there on social media still investigating the case, which I appreciate because I don't think I would find all this by myself. How come it's not letting me present? Oh, here it goes. Okay. Sorry, it's kind of crashing. Here we go. Okay, so this video here is the satellite video, and this is the moments before the plane disappears. Now, what I want you to do is from the part where we see this cloud just to the left of the plane, here, I'll show here. I want you to look kind of at from this part to where my mouse is now over here. What you're going to see is these orbs are going to be moving really fast, and they're going to slightly slow down right before the plane disappears. So you see those orbs kind of slow down right there, right here. You can see those orbs slow down, especially this is probably the best one where you can see it like now. The orbs are slowing down slightly. This we think is consistent with that same part where I was showing in the other video where the orbs are realigning. Now, this is a really, really odd detail to fake. Is now, why are you faking these orbs slowing down, the orbs reorienting directly before that singularity gets induced? So those are some of the more interesting details that kind of need to be explained. Like I've seen a lot of videos that I think are fake out there. Usually I think I can pick them out right away. From this one, of course, when you first look at these videos, you go, how is that possible? That can't be real, right? But there's have a certain aura of authenticity to them. And the more you dig into them, instead of the more stuff sticking out as fake, the more stuff sticks out as being real. And that's what's really incredible about them, in my opinion.
Are we saying here that this is actually the first time in history that are we calling this a portal or a black hole or a wormhole? What are we calling it?
Yeah, terminology is really important. So what I'll say too is that there's probably a small percentage chance that maybe this is still a cloaking event. Although the thing with cloaking events, you see these, these trails behind the plane. We've ruled out contrails because we can see the cumulus clouds in the background, and they only form at very low altitudes. And contrails only form at high altitudes. So this has got to be either smoke or exhaust from the plane. Now, the reason why we think it's smoke is because we have identified a lithium-ion battery fire from the point when the plane went dark with 19 witnesses that all corroborate a similar event. But it could potentially still be exhaust. The point, though, is that when this plane disappears, the smoke, the exhaust stops right in its tracks. If this plane was cloaked somehow, even if all the electromagnetic signatures were cloaked, you would still see this trail continuing forward. There's a small percentage chance that it could be some type of annihilation event. The problem with that is that as far as we know, there's no such thing as antimatter. And so that's what we would need in order to be able to annihilate this plane without it blowing up part of the planet, since E equals MC squared.
I thought we had observed antimatter. I
don't believe so, but people out there can correct me if I'm wrong on that one. But so the big issue here is the E equals MC squared. So if this is some type of annihilation event, like this plane is getting turned into a nuke, that's a huge amount of mass. So this would be a gigantic explosion, much bigger than what we see there. In fact, the clouds are barely even disturbed, even though there seems to be a little bit of disturbance. The flash that we see there does accurately illuminate the clouds in the background and the foreground. And that's another indication that we think what we're looking at there is actually nighttime, is that if it was daytime, the flash would not be as prominent. And we also don't see any shadows on these videos as well. Like the plane is not creating a shadow onto the clouds or anywhere else that we can see in the video. So this really leaves one option, which is a superluminal event. I think that wording really matters here, because I think that when we start talking about portals, a lot of people start thinking about, Stargate SG-1. When we talk about and use the word teleportation, people start thinking about beam me up, Scotty, which is really not what this would be. From a scientific standpoint, we were calling it macroscopic phase conjugation, which is getting the waves into a coherence, where now we have this plane acting like a wave function similar to the double slit experiment. What we're talking about here is quantum entanglement, quantum teleportation. And quantum teleportation is proven. Time dilation is also real. These are concepts from the scientific standpoint that are very important to understand that this type of event can actually be real and consistent with physics and science as we know it.
Yeah, it looks like CERN, there were experiments done at CERN to verify antimatter existence, the existence of antimatter.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there could be a possibility then that what you were seeing there is some type of antimatter annihilation event as well. But I think that from the engineers and scientists I've spoken to, it seems like the highest likelihood probability is some type of superluminal event, which would require potentially a fourth orb that would be entangled to the other three. I have my trusty rubber bands here with me, where I kind of just do a little visualization for people. And the idea here is if you take this rubber band, you imagine you've got your three orbs in your plane over here flying away, and you've got your fourth orb somewhere over here, which can be anywhere on the planet you want, right? And then all of a sudden you let go, and now all four are over here, right? That's what we think we're dealing with here from a scientific standpoint, a quantum entanglement type effect, that this plane is slingshotting at the speed of light, maybe even faster than the speed of light. And this would then be consistent with the double slit experiment and non-locality, and the idea that our reality is a construct where our reality is projected onto a matrix, if you want to consider it like that, that there's some underlying structure to the universe. Some people could call it, you could call it transdimensional, I suppose. I think that all of these different terms that people use are simply different words for describing the same thing, which is what we are seeing in these two videos.
I wonder what the motive is.
Yeah.
For this particular.
Yeah, so I'm ready with all the answers for you here. Although what I'll say though is I don't have all the answers. I can't pretend like I know exactly where this plane went, what happened to the passengers. I'm happy to speculate. But the motive here is going to probably be the 20 Freescale semiconductor scientists and engineers on board this plane. The conspiracy theories right after were all speculating that these people were involved. Now, I'm not on board with this. I think one of the most common ones is one related to this patent with these 4 people that if they go missing, it defaults to the Rothschild group or whatever, but that's not how the patents work. Like these patents are in people's names, but they're owned by the company themselves. So even if the people were to go missing, it's not significantly changing the framework of who owns those. But the real issue is that these people might actually be tied to the very technology we see being used on the plane, which is really now I'm going to say this wrong, but what enables this type of technology is superconductivity, potentially even high temperature superconductivity. And there's a 2005 NSA, National Security Agency report that was looking at the commercial emergence of superconductive microchips, room temperature superconductive microchips. And Freescale Semiconductors was listed 9 times in that report. It's looking at their various models of their chips. Keep in mind, this is in 2005. And it says that this technology could be available by 2010 or 2012, but only if the government were to intervene and provide funding for it. Freescale has also been tied to the United States Aerospace and Defense via serving RF power needs for them. So these employees were potentially related to the technology on the plane. And if you believe the weirdest letter that I've ever gotten in my entire life through a YouTube channel that appeared beginning of January, there's also an espionage scenario here where potentially these people, or some of them on board, the 8 of those 20 Freescale semiconductor scientists that are Chinese and Chinese nationals, could be defecting and bringing the technology to China, and the United States has set up a whole plan here to prevent that from happening.
Yeah, I was looking at the mix of passengers on there, and apparently you were saying 20 employees from Freescale Semiconductor, a company based in Austin, Texas, was on the flight. These individuals were engineers and other experts working in the field of semiconductor technology, and they were traveling to China for work-related reasons.
Yeah, the cover is that they were going for, well, what I had heard was they were going to improve the plants there, from what I saw from some articles. But some of our investigators have found that there was supposedly some 1-week training course, which both seem like pretty odd things to be going to China to do, but
Yeah.
maybe the plant thing.
Yeah.
So I'm not really sure. There's a lot of interesting stuff out there that we're probably not going to have time to dig into. But one thing I'll point out for people is there's a supposed Russian intelligence report. That Russian intelligence report is very interesting. It basically affirms this espionage scenario. It connects the death of 2 Navy SEALs on board the Alabama Maersk, which was the boat that was the Captain Phelps famous boat, the Tom Hanks movie that was out there. And that there's supposedly some cargo from that boat that got put on the plane, and that Russia knew that there was something on this plane, and that they told China, and that China was actually planning on diverting the plane to a different location. And that's really interesting, because when you look at what happened afterwards, there's some little known facts that people don't know about, which is China hacked the Malaysian Ministry of Transport, I believe, the next day on March 9th, 2014. And they stole the crisis meeting minute notes as well as classified information about the plane, which is really weird, because what's classified? What would you be stealing in a situation where, the information should all just be public, right? For a plane that supposedly went missing the previous day. And then 5 days later, they released satellite imagery. And the satellite imagery was supposedly of debris in the South China Sea, but none was ever found when they looked. And if you look at those pictures, it looks like 3 orbs. It's really bizarre in an equilateral triangle formation. And I had speculated that what if this is some type of spy craft, like China saying to the United States, who would be the only people who would understand these pictures, we know what you did with the plane. We were watching, right? And the really bizarre part is this letter to me. And if you guys want to watch and you want to be creeped out tonight, Google Diego Garcia whistleblower, a letter to Ashton Forbes on YouTube. And it's 11 minutes long. And this letter says that the whole thing was a setup by the United States to let China see and watch their whole plan of these defectors going to China, like blow up, or, sorry to use a bad pun, but to go up in smoke. And that those images were supposedly China acquiescing, saying that, yeah, you guys got us, like, we give up kind of scenario. Pretty damn weird.
Or what if, here's another crazy scenario. If China actually produced the videos and it just hijacked the plane, diverted it to, right, so they could just take the scientists like we did in World War II.
Yeah, I thought about stuff like that. But the problem is, you have to know what those assets are that are there, right? There certainly could be an element of national espionage and spycraft at play regarding the videos. I think most people say, well, what if the United States government made the videos? I think they would make the most sense from the fact that we're looking at this cyber system and we're looking at their drone video. Like, how does China know at all what these systems look like? We've had to deduce all this just from investigating around and finding all these videos of like Lockheed Martin stuff on the internet. But the problem with like the United States being the one to make it is that it implicates them in the disappearance. So, to your point, like if someone's faking it, it would be like China making it look like United States did it, or United States faking it to make it look like China did it, right? Like that's what you would expect. You wouldn't expect like the United States making the videos to make United States look like they did it. It's kind of like if someone were to come up and there's like a mysterious murder, and someone comes forward and goes, "Oh, I've got this video here, guys, from 5 years ago, and it shows these people being murdered." You'd go, well, like, hey, did you murder them? Like, the first person you'd want to talk to is the person who took the video, right? And try to figure out what they did. So, and then the other part of it too is that when we look at the orbs in these videos, I don't think that we're looking at little aliens inside of little balls. These look more like balls of plasma where there may be some type of mechanical thing inside there, but there's an energy field around them, what we refer to as a non-radiating barrier, like a bubble, where they are displacing themselves from space-time, which is what's allowing them to float freely, to move at these incredibly high speeds. To me, this is our technology. As hard as and crazy that is to say, and I don't know that if we've necessarily gotten there to this level of technological advancement naturally, or if we've had some help. But I do think this is related to Lockheed Martin. If I'm going to pinpoint one particular defense contractor, they're the ones who we found all these patents that if you look at them through an individual lens without having seen these videos, you go, oh, this is just some crazy device, a coherent matter wave beam. Like, you think, well, I don't know what that is. Sounds Star Trek-y, right? But when you start to look at these videos and you look at the coherent matter wave beam, now you're going, wait, this is a tiny microchip the size of several microns. Now, the size of a microns is we're talking about like the size of the COVID virus, right? Super, super tiny. And this is a like a little processor that can basically cause a coherent matter wave beam, which is exactly what we were speculating could lead to superconductivity. Which is a coherence of the wave functions of electrons. And then it's like, okay, well, that's like what we need for these videos to be real. And so now I'm going, okay, Lockheed Martin potentially might have these type of technology. It's a matter of taking all these patents they have, putting them together, and next thing you know, you've got superconductive harmonic orb, as I like to call them.
So you're not opposed to this being our own technology versus aliens per se?
Oh, I think it is our technology. I absolutely think it's ours.
But why are people? But why are people then? The whole aura around you, surrounding this, is that aliens took the plane through a portal or something.
Yeah, because that's a lot easier to vilify people's real opinions, right? And this is a big part of this investigation is realizing that when people are trying to discredit people out there, that in today's day and age, and in the government as well, is that I don't think although they certainly can silence people the old-fashioned way, with the old two gunshots to the back of the head situation, but it's more about just simply discrediting people. And it's a lot easier to discredit someone when you make up fake narratives about what they're saying, right? And this is what people do with me a lot, is that if you talk to these official investigators or whatever, they're out there, they'll go, oh, well, Ashton thinks that aliens zapped the plane to another dimension. But when you actually talk to me and you listen to the stuff that I'm saying, you realize that that's not at all what I'm saying. Is that what I'm saying is that, like, this is our technology. This is an operation. This plane's not going to the Andromeda galaxy, right? It's going towards somewhere near the Maldives to get to Diego Garcia. Which is a lot more of a reasonable approach as much as a plane teleporting out of the space-time is. But it's a lot easier to digest than the idea of, oh, it's just aliens, zapping the plane to their home mother world or whatever. So it's really the difference between what people are actually saying versus these narratives that people put in people's mouths. And you see this everywhere in mainstream media as well, right? I can't even go 1 or 2 days without seeing some major headline on one of the social media sites that is vilifying someone falsely, where they'll say like, so-and-so is saying this thing, and this person is some crazed conspiracy theorist that believes XYZ, right? And it's just all poisoning the well and all these methods of disinformation in order to get people to reject what people are actually saying.
I'll tell you, and it's working, because I'm very happy to hear you. I'm very happy that you're here and that we're talking about this, because my whole impression of what, from the things I've read was that was your stance.
That's crazy. Yeah.
I thought somehow I was going to be able to convince you to be more objective.
To
this interview, but it sounds like you are at least looking at. I would look at whatever the simplest. I hate using the term Occam's razors over and over again, but I would try to look towards the simplest explanation.
Quick question: what was the term you used? Macroscopic wave. What was it?
Macroscopic phase conjugation. You can also look up macroscopic quantum coherence as well.
I got you.
Yeah, and if you Google those,
there was a question in the comments just now. Do I think it's possible? Well, phase conjugation is a known science. Anything you can do on the quantum scale or the micro scale, you can do on a macro scale with the proper technologies. About the rubber band snapping, Bradley Voorhees talks about this a lot. How when you actually create The Higgs, you get the negative electrons, you shake them, they'll go back in time. And the second you stop shaking them, they snap back to the current now. So if this is theoretically, just speaking theoretically, if this is our technology, well, maybe it's coming from the future, coming back to the back, it sets up this wave coherence, and then it snaps back towards the future. Theoretically, it is possible, is all I'm going to say. That answers Daniel's question in the chat.
And it could be something even more simple than that, right?
Yeah, well, you have to think too that everything that the military has is 30 years more advanced than ours. And when you think AI, which is coming out, and the ability of ChatGPT, you think microprocessors, which are out, and our ability to create computer chips. You think about electrogravitics, which has been designed since the 1920s. There's definitely some technology that we are not aware of publicly that exists within the SAPs, right? That's all I can say. I can't say it's real or not, or that we have it or not, because I haven't seen it physically, but I can say that the potential of it is possible.
I mean, if you just look at the simple fact that the amount of espionage China it exercises on the United States just to gain intellectual property, that alone is a motive right there, to kidnap 20 semiconductor scientists.
I mean, that's how the U.S. got ahead in the rocket race, right? We got all the German scientists.
None of those guys were related to the retracted papers on room temperature semiconductors, right? None of those people were involved. I don't know who the exact people are on the plane. So
yeah, so they weren't named in that report. No one's particularly named. So that's something we've been trying to dig into, but it's really hard to find. Turns out even finding information about the people on the plane was not easy as well. And we've had one investigator who has been able to figure out what seats a lot of these people were in as well. One thing I want to say real quick is I definitely use Occam's razor in terms of the path of least resistance to try to find the simplest explanation. And even in a situation like this, I try to, even though when you're talking about something that's so fantastical about a plane literally disappearing, right? And that's why I don't think we need aliens or non-human intelligence to explain anything that we're seeing here, right? I think that a lot of people that want to be aliens or whatever just think from the perspective of, well, aliens have this unknown advanced technology. Isn't it easier for it to be some unknown technology? That's not how I think. Like, I want to be able to explain rationally everything that I'm seeing here. And that's why, consistent with what Alexei is saying, that other scientists and engineers, I've talked to Salvatore Pais, who has these patents out there that people are calling UFO patents, Bob Grenier, who's been looking at low energy nuclear reactions, Dave Rossi, who is a DoD contractor as well. And these are the people that have told me pretty much the same thing that Alexei's had. My opinion is that the military industrial complex, I used to think they were like 10 or 20 years more advanced than the public, right? Now I'm thinking they're like 50 or 100 years more advanced than the public. And I independently came to the same conclusion that if this technology is real, these might be some of the first videos we've ever seen, if they're real, that really prove a lot of these theories and capabilities are possible. And what that really implies is that this stuff is tied up in special access programs, SAPs, right? And this is the reason why Congress can't see it, is that SAPs are actually higher than top secret compartmentalized. Like, it's straight up, nobody gets to know about them. Part of what I've realized too, talking and looking into what Congress people have access to, is that it's actually not even a requirement to hold a security clearance to be in Congress. The people, I'm sure many of them still do have security clearances, but the only ones that even have access to even stuff even approaching this are the people that are in like the Intel committee chairs and stuff like that as well. So I'm now starting to think that even Congress has no idea about a lot of this stuff potentially being real.
Well, we really don't want we really want people to be able to be elected who, even if they can't get right, it kind of goes against democracy to require your ability to get a security clearance to become elected. But I see what you mean, though. You know what I mean? I mean, half the candidates would be, probably not qualify for for security clearance.
One concept I find interesting just in the whole UFO phenomenon concept is the concept of a breakaway civilization group. And you mentioned earlier the Rothschilds. What was the connection there?
Yeah, so there's a couple conspiracies out there. One that's gotten a lot of support because a comedian named Dick Gregory has a video out there where you see him, where he says that this plane went to Diego Garcia and they do all these horrible things at Diego Garcia. And his theory is, if you look at the people on board the plane, that 4 of them were tied to a patent, and if they all disappeared, then it reverts to the Carlyle Group, which is owned by the Rothschilds or something like that. And the problem was I dug into the patent stuff and realized that's not how the patents really work. But I do think that still the overall motivation of these scientists and engineers is still, that's to me definitely why this plane would be getting targeted, you know?
Well,
And
I
we've
feel like
looked at it.
that's why they don't even teach electrogravitics in colleges or universities. Like it's a field that science that exists that is not taught in any university.
It's all suppressed. And what I found out as well from looking at Tom Montauk's YouTube channel about scalar physics, that's what I've been looking into recently, is that in the textbooks, they just cheat and they go, well, we can't understand these scalar physics and the gravitational potential. So we're just going to zero out these numbers here. And that's, you know, again, shows that how academia kind of turns a blind eye, because really what science should be is looking at observable reality and trying to explain it, as opposed to just saying, well, these numbers don't match up, so we're just going to zero some stuff out here. And that's, I think, how you blind an entire society to the real capabilities of what electrogravitics and engineering can achieve. But just to, and I love this conversation, by the way, but just to go back real quick to the Freescale semiconductor scientists, why are there 20 people from the same company on board this plane? Like, my company is a very large company. And if it was even more than like 2 or 3 people, you're going to trigger some flag that says this is too much of a risk, right? And here's the weird part. Our investigators have been looking at where they're sitting. They're all sitting next to each other as well, like in big chunks. I think like 12 or 13 of them are right next to each other on the right side of the plane, all sitting next to each other. So to me, that says that the tickets were booked together. If the tickets were booked together, they definitely should have had a flag go off saying, hey, we can't have 20 of our super important engineers and scientists all on the same flight, right? So that's a lot of red flags about this situation.
Do you know what the patent was that could be an contention there?
So I've heard different things related to it. Now, in terms of the Dickie Gregory one, there's like different rumors. Some people are saying it's related to some nanotechnology. I did an interview with, I want to say it was the Brian Lupo interview that I did. His name's CanCon on Twitter, where I believe he was the one, I believe it's him, that said that they might be related to, you know, microchips and nanochips. The one in the NSA is really looking at room temperature superconductive microchips, which are used in quantum computers. So just looking at this Freescale semiconductor company in general, like there's a lot of advanced stuff that they're working on. They broke off from Motorola in 2004. There's an interview with Project Camelot where a guy named Mike Harris, who was a contractor for them when they split off, has this weird thing at the end of his 1-hour interview where he just says, hey, can I tell you what I think happened to the plane, after he's talking with her about the whole history of Freescale. And she's like, yeah, sure, go ahead. He's like, somebody hit it with an interdimensional portal and it'll be found again. It fell into a hole. And she's like, laughs a little bit. And he's just straight faced. And you're like, wait, what? Like, if you look at, like, back then, you would have, 2014, you would look at that interview and go, what is he trying to be funny? Like, I don't get it. But like now when you're looking at these videos, you go, wait, holy crap. What did Mike Harris know? And why did he make that statement?
All right. Well, so I have one more question. My knowledge of physics is not very good, but I understand you said it was quantum and then macroscopic coherence. Is that it?
Yeah.
So,
macroscopic phase conjugation or macroscopic quantum coherence. I used to think it was macroscopic quantum decoherence. And these were terms that I had followed, like PBS Spacetime. If you guys want to watch their clips, a lot of their stuff is really interesting from the scientific and physics perspective, which is really trying to understand the nature of the double slit experiment and why we have the function. Yeah. And then I had people, when I started talking to the real scientists that, I don't want to say like the real scientists, but the scientists that I spoke to on my podcast, that's when I started to realize that it's really macroscopic quantum coherence, which is the idea of hitting, like, if you imagine the electrons around any object, and normally resistance, electrical resistance is based on what the material is, and it's either higher or lower electrical resistance, which really means how many of these electrons are free or are ready to move freely. And what we need for superconductivity is we need those electrons to move perfectly freely with no resistance whatsoever. The idea here is that we can induce superconductivity and potentially maybe even any material with the right matter wave beam, for example. And when you achieve a level of coherence at a macro scale, now you can take something that's a giant airplane and you can treat it the same way you would treat like an atom, right? Which is something that's now working on the quantum level. And so physicists like Roy D. Herbert would say, if you achieve this coherence effect of the electrons now moving freely around the entire plane, that now you can have the properties denote the behavior. So something even the size of a 777 can now act like a quantum object would act, like an
But
atom. Or
That just
wouldn't
seems
wouldn't
so
at least
far
the
out.
skin wouldn't at least the skin of the jet have to be the same material that as far
that's something
as
that I struggle with.
conductivity?
And I'm not sure if you can create like an electromagnetic field around the plane, or in terms of, does it have to be the same material or what have you, or maybe there's a situation where these lithium-ion batteries are somehow a catalyst. I can't say like that I know all the answers regarding some of that,
This
but
would be for the orbs. Like this might be where the orbs coming in towards the plane there at the last second might have some role in this.
yeah, exactly. And again, it's like we're talking about science and technology that I think is potentially even like 50 years beyond wherever the public get this.
The reason I'm suspicious, based on my knowledge of quantum mechanics, like the union of the macroscopic world and the quantum world has been the golden goal of science for like the past 100 years, since Einstein talked about spooky action at a distance. But that, to me, like if I see that, I also see, or if our capability to not have quantum disentanglement or whatever it's called, when you look at the atom, it changes and all that. If we've solved that, that means that we probably solved nuclear fusion as well. And so I'm asking you, now I want to ask, where are the nuclear fusion systems? If a government were to be funding, I mean, that would be beneficial for the governments if they figure that out, to start making those nuclear fusion devices as well.
I mean, we're supposed to have a fusion reactor within that scale of 10 to 15 years, right? Is it ITER or whatever? What is it called? The people who are creating
it does some good breakdowns of describing how we're actually really far off from nuclear fusion. It's like the energy input into the devices is still like way too much to get energy out of it. But I mean, China's showing some massive progress on that. I think the order of operations there would be like nuclear fusion breakthrough and then the planes disappearing.
That's where phase conjugation has been well developed for quite some time at this point, actually. And that's basically the overlapping of different size waves to create an energy density. So if you have the proper spiraling energy, you can create extremely high amplitudes with very little input.
That's under very controlled conditions. What we're seeing in the plane, like there are so many factors there. You have changing direction, and what we know about fluid dynamics or aerodynamics is that it's like impossible to calculate. Honestly, like when we try to do air simulation on a flight simulator or whatever, it's never accurate because you have to account for the movement of every tiny molecule there. So I mean, maybe that doesn't have to be accounted for when you go to these technologies.
Yeah, and that's where theoretically, if you have a more advanced AI system, you could theoretically, maybe be able to accomplish that.
And this is the weird part, because even before I understood any of this science to the level you guys are talking about it now, which I'm barely able to keep up with, is that I was already saying that the prerequisites here were room temperature superconductivity and AI as well, which would be enabled by quantum computers. And this is where then I started having engineers and scientists reaching out to me, and they're going like, you nailed it. In fact, that letter to me, I strongly suggest you guys listen to that tonight. I think it'll blow some of your guys' minds. One of the key aspects of the letter and the YouTube video, and this YouTube letter is in an AI voice, but it's not written by AI. I mean, maybe it used help, I'm not sure, but it actually mentions that we were unable to use this technology until the development of quantum computers, which allowed for nonlinear events to be processed more quickly in real time. And I had never heard anything like that before. And I went, wait, what? And that supposedly happened in the early 2000s. And just like you were saying, like, I think that when we see these orbs spinning around the plane, there's some kind of purpose there. I don't know exactly what it is, but it looks like they're mapping the plane to some degree. To your point, they may be preparing it for, exactly the event that they're about to do. And then they switch into a ring formation and they're going around it, spinning around in a ring. And then all of a sudden you see them converge. Seems to induce the singularity. The way I talk about it is like if you were to take magnets of the same polarity and jam them together, and you have this really strong repulsive effect, but you multiply that up times like 1,000,000. That's how I think that you can create those. And this is just my layman's terms, the energy densities in terms of what you were talking about. This is actually exactly what Salvatore Pais says in my Hard Truths podcast number 1 and 4, I think I did, with him, where he talks about breaking the Schwinger limit by achieving these energy densities. And they even begin to talk about the spin factors of the electrons. And I just learned last week what those mean in terms of integer spins of 1 and 2 being equivalent to bosons, which is where then the bosons can collapse down onto a single point. The same way where in superconductivity, you get Cooper pairs that begin to form, where now they collapse down and form like basically wave functions with no resistance as well. And so the idea here is that you would create superconductivity somehow like artificially without having to have metamaterials or anything like that, using the right energy densities and levels. And that may be as well why this event is cold in the videos, is that, you know, one of the requirements to achieve superconductivity in most materials is cooling it down. And that somehow then causes these Cooper pairs to form, and then you get that superconductive no resistance. So I think, to me, that's the craziest part about these videos in general, is how all this science starts to line up with them as well. And it starts to really allow for these kinds of conversations we're having now, where we're going, wait, that is kind of consistent with it. And so it's like, who faked these videos to all these degree where it's like consistent with science and physics that even in 2024 now we're barely able to understand. And this was 10 years ago. So
Well,
10 years ago, somebody made these with all these details. Go ahead.
just off the top of my head, one way to create room temperature, in quotes, superconductivity, is if you're not actually working with electricity, but you're working with gravity waves, because gravity travels instantaneously, dependent on the type of material.
Interesting. Very interesting. Especially
that just came to mind while we were talking. Just a thought, you know.
What does it mean that gravity travels?
I was going to say, isn't gravity an effect?
Yeah, gravity waves are an effect, but they occur instantaneously. Like if
They
the
travel at the speed of light, right?
If the sun were to just disappear, it wouldn't take 8 minutes for the Earth to change in its trajectory. It would just instantly shoot off into space.
Well,
No,
so
it would take 8 minutes.
LIGO detected, like, isn't the way that LIGO works? We have one on the far west side of the U.S. and then one in Louisiana or something, and then they detected the delay of two black holes colliding way out yonder, sending gravitational waves to one point, and then there was the delay on the second one. Or do I have that mixed up with something else?
I might be mistaken. I'm not sure.
I think they
From my
travel at the speed
understanding,
of light.
I let you know my understanding. I don't know the 100%.
I think it was like a very small delay.
Yeah, what I've heard is they travel the speed of light, but still, I think that the idea of what Alexei's saying still is somewhat relevant, which is that they're going to happen very quickly. And then I think the idea in general of gravity waves allowing for the induction of superconductivity, high temperature superconductivity, is a really interesting one, because that may be a way to get around this idea that Patrick's was putting forth, which is like, does the type of material matter, right? Does it have to be a very specific material? Maybe there's a way that the gravity waves can get around that requirement. I'm not sure. I mean, now we're talking about stuff.
That's more what I was getting at. The only thing I know about right now that can get around all that stuff would be a gravity wave.
You know what, too? Gravity waves themselves are incident dependent, right? Because the effect of gravity on the Earth from the sun is just that. And that's why it would take 8 minutes for us to lose, like you were saying, we would shoot straight off into space, right? It wouldn't be an immediate effect for the gravity part of it. So that effect is different from the speed of a gravity wave, depending on the incident, right? What created the gravity wave? That maybe they have two different speeds or something.
Now we're in theoretical land, and
I'm trying to understand. That's one of the things. That's one of the reasons I actually do these shows, is to try to learn more about physics and philosophy. And I've actually learned a lot tonight, because, I mean, I love the science behind all of this, but I'm suspicious of China's role in some sort of active espionage, and some sort of state actor like them would be able to produce these videos more easily than a novice, amateur. But again, I'll take the simple route, and you all can, I love the expanded version, or I love all the theories.
What it reminds me of is the TV show on Netflix called Manifest. I think that's
a lot of people bring that up. Apparently the plane shows up in the future or something. Yeah,
and it comes back 5 years later. I mean, if this thing did get sucked through a portal of some sort, that's a bad word to use, but if it got sucked into the future or through a different dimension, then it will reappear. in the future.
Yep.
And where will that reappear? What future? I'm just theoretically speaking here, obviously, but
Yeah,
This is
time
the-
dilation is real. If you watch the movie Interstellar, that was my first experience with time dilation, and I've sitting there watching that movie, going, "Wait, is this real?" When they go to the planet near the black hole, and they're there for like an hour, and they come back, and like 30, 20 years have gone by for the guy on the space station. And reality is, it is real. The closer you are to, the more mass you're next to, the slower your time flows. And we don't really experience that difference here on the planet, right? Because we're all on the Earth of the planet, which is very cylindrical and round. But even if you were to go up in outer space, your time's going to speed up a little bit because you're going to be near a slightly less amount of mass.
We've
So,
experimentally proven that too with the space station.
Yep. For decades.
Yeah.
And this is how satellites actually have to take this into account. Otherwise, they would fall to the Earth as well.
Right.
And then to your point, going back to the fusion power thing, that ITER, ITER, yeah, that is one of the big experiments they're doing with fusion power. And I remember reading about that, watching the science shows about that, even I want to say 8 to 10 years ago. And I'm sitting there thinking, why are we already building fusion power plants? Are we further ahead than I would have thought? Because the reality is, this type of technology is not just teleportation. We are now talking, to your guys' points earlier, potential medical healing capabilities. We are talking about force fields, cloaking capabilities, fusion power over unity, which is essentially free energy, which is a slightly different branch from fusion power. The idea of over unity is that you take your system and you open your system up to the vacuum energy of space-time itself, because this space right here is not empty. There's stuff in it, right? And if you can borrow that energy, now you can have a situation where you are not violating the laws of thermodynamics. You have less energy going into it because you're borrowing the energy of space-time to produce a local energy that is higher than what you're putting into it. And then you can also, I think that the logical conclusion here, which kind of loops everything back together and gets to the point that I like to kind of summarize with, is weapons of mass destruction. Is that you can take this type of technology and you can scale it up. You can turn it into a weapon that is going to make nuclear weapons look like little baby toys. That is going to potentially, even Salvatore Pais in his patent high frequency gravitational wave generator, he says could destroy an asteroid or a planetoid. And I think he's being coy there, because the reality is this technology could destroy the entire planet. Like, entire planet, push of a button, poof, gone. Maybe even destroy the entire sun. If you listen to stuff that I asked Bob Greenier this in my Hard Truths podcast with him. And now, to me, this is the part where, if you are the United States government or any government, first of all, you want to secure this technology for yourself, right? The same way with the Manhattan Project, we want to have nuclear weapons. This can also be used as a deterrent, where you could potentially, to your point earlier about annihilation and antimatter, you can actually annihilate any incoming nuke. It might be the perfect defense mechanism as well. So you can understand how this type of technology would be absolutely crucial to be able to keep your trump card versus Russia and China and all our adversaries. And at the same time, you don't want warring nations to have this, because anyone pushes the button, or if a terrorist learns about this and they decide, I'm going to suicide bomb myself, but I'm going to suicide bomb the whole planet and destroy it, how long would we really last?
I mean, this is where I would think, if a government were to be testing such things with such power, they would do so on another planet. But again, governments can be very stupid, to put it nicely. They can get very overexcited about what they're going with. I mean, we already do have the hydrogen bomb, and so since Oppenheimer and the atom bomb, we've seen it's 80 times more powerful than the atom bomb. So we've known about that power for decades, and we've managed to keep that suppressed. It's just way too dangerous for any government to want to use. And we've done a pretty good job of keeping nuclear missiles and nuclear weapons out of war in general since then, since World War II. If this is what's going on here, this is a whole other level.
But this can also explain, for the people who are into UFOlogy, et cetera, is why are they keeping aliens, crafts hidden from us, right? What's the big motivation for hiding that stuff? You look at this and you take it to its logical conclusion, and you go, oh, okay, now I see why you might want to hide this, right? Because I was in a space with Dr. Greer and Kim.com, and Kim.com's asking him, well, why don't the aliens just give us the cure for cancer? And the answer is, it's not that simple. Is that the moment you find a unification theory of quantum mechanics and general relativity, you've opened up Pandora's box to everything, right? All those things we just described. It's all or nothing. It's not Burger King, have it your way, pick whichever thing you want, right? The moment you've opened that door up scientifically, now everything's coming with it. How are you going to stop people from developing these types of weapons, of like a rail gun or some other type of weapon that could just completely annihilate the entire planet. You know, it's not that simple. And then that's where you say, okay, well, now they have to keep everything secret. Because if you were to come out and say, okay, aliens are real, people are going to go, how the heck did they get here? If you were to come out and say these crash retrievals are real, and we have little crafts that can hover and float freely, people are going to go, okay, well, there must be a unification theory then in order to allow that to happen. And that's why I think these things are undeniably linked together. As much as I don't personally care too much whether or not aliens are visiting us, because it doesn't impact my day-to-day life, this type of technology absolutely can impact my life and the lives of everybody on the planet.
I think that is where all of our physics is going to, is that unification theory. And what I like to call it, I've basically developed my own unification theory. I know it sounds wild, but I did. And I call it 5D physics. And it's working through, other people might call it black hole physics or things of that nature. But when you understand that we live in a dimensional layer, and there's inner dimensions and outer dimensions, and we're perceiving a very specific layer, once you can start moving through those different dimensions, you know, energy can't be created or destroyed, but it can be transferred through dimensions. You can start to create a lot of different effects, from healing all the way to big weapons, right? And so, yeah, you're right when you say that it opens up a new can of worms or technology for everyone. Yeah.
And I think it's already been discovered probably multiple times independently. And even your theory that you just mentioned there, I think that's all, a lot of it's just a matter of terminology. It's that you're doing the same understanding of our underlying reality, which is saying that there's some kind of underlying framework, there's an extra dimension there that we're not perceiving, right? And that if you're then allowing for these effects to translate between different dimensions, traverse between these dimensions, it's like, now this can be a way where you can explain a double slit experiment, where you may have the capability to create, you know, a wormhole or these other types of effects that seem like magic, but it's really just a matter of understanding that our reality is a construct, you know. And that if you have this construct, then okay, now you can allow for all this stuff that seems like magic to be real.
Well, it also ultimately will change our perception of the universe, and we'll see a bigger picture as well. And so understanding that, understanding the health implications, I think that might change a lot of the customs associated with our day-to-day lives too. When we understand that, maybe circling back to what Patrick and I were talking about earlier, Michael Levin's morphogenetic spaces, we might realize that our current customs and cultures don't really allow us to connect magnetically to each other, thus creating a lot of the sickness that exists within the human population. There's a lot of implications that arise from it.
What I think gets into a whole nother discussion, but I think that a lot of we haven't evolved to perceive a lot of our own reality. Is when we don't know what 85% of that matter is, dark matter. I think a lot of things can be, once those discoveries are made, we're going to be surprised at how much is actually part of our reality, and we don't really need those other dimensions. I
agree.
So
Roy D. Herbert would say that a lot of the rest is contextual, in terms of we have the dimensions, the 3 dimensions that we see, the 4th dimension of time, and that the rest, I mean, people may call them extra dimensions, but other people will say, like Roy D. Herbert, there's contextual properties. Like you think of it in terms of the underlying code of a computer program, right? Like and then people call those extra dimensions, but really another way to look at them is those are the underlying rules by which our reality has to obey. Real quick, I want to bring it back to some people in the chat were confused about the flight path and the timeline of what I've been talking about. So the scenario that we've put forth has this plane taking off from Kuala Lumpur, going to Beijing. And when it gets over the South China Sea, when it goes dark, there are 487 pounds of lithium-ion batteries. 2 pallets of these are in the forward cargo bay right next to the main equipment center, which is also known as the electronics bay. So I think the most plausible explanation for why the plane went dark is that these batteries exploded and were on fire, and that they damaged the electronics bay, which caused the plane to go dark. This is corroborated by Mike McKay, who's the first witness that sees the plane at this time from an oil rig, and he sees the plane on fire for 5 to 10 seconds. Now, there's automatic halon fire extinguishing devices that would immediately deploy and put the fire out. And then you have your low rate fire extinguishers that can go for another 3 hours. The cargo bays are actually built to withstand fires. So if you're constantly putting it out, then you can imagine how it's not going to completely destroy and disintegrate the plane immediately, but you're going to be on the clock. The plane turns around, and at that same time when the plane went dark, there's 9 witnesses on the coast that reported hearing loud noises. And these are witnesses from Thailand and Malaysia all the way up and down the coast. 10 minutes later, 2 more things happen when this plane turns around, goes directly to Penang, closest airport that you would go to in an emergency scenario. Another 777 pilot hears a communication from the plane. That pilot does not want to be named, probably because they don't want their whole lives to be destroyed, but they heard a bunch of static and either the pilot or the co-pilot. This is important because this indicates that communications weren't potentially dead, and that communication that we got at 17:19, 11 minutes before that, was not really the last communication. This is corroborated by what we talked about earlier, where the Malaysian Ministry of Defense somehow knows that the plane is not hostile, and that's why they don't send up jets to track it or to shoot it down. So at the same time that communication is received, there's 8 fishermen on a boat 10 miles off the coast. They see this plane flying extremely low, unusually low, but it makes sense in a fire scenario. When I did the Tim Pool podcast, some people posted in the comments saying that they were pilots, and this is exactly what you would do in a fire scenario. The plane might be depressurized, but they're not trying to asphyxiate all the passengers. They're trying to fly low enough that the passengers have enough oxygen to be able to breathe while they're fighting the fire. And this is also important because the halon fire extinguishing devices suck oxygen outside of the surrounding area. That's how they work.
They
So
deplete
you
the
can
oxygen supply.
Exactly.
I
So
have
now the
experience with
plane-
those systems.
Yep. So the plane flies to Penang. We don't know why it doesn't land, but we know it was flying low because the co-pilot's cell phone pings a cell tower, meaning it had to potentially be lower than 7,000 feet. Keep in mind, this is 2 a.m. local time there. I think it was 1752 UTC. So this narrative says, oh, the pilot's saying goodbye to his hometown. Makes no damn sense at all. They're probably trying to land there. Now, if the plane's on fire, if the landing gear is damaged, if the runway lights are not on because it's 2 a.m. and it's third world country, whatever reason, there would have been a judgment call in terms of what you have to do next. If you're going to try to land on your belly somewhere, plane's probably going to explode. If you try to dump the fuel, plane may explode due to the fire. Next scenario might be go land in the water. Now, where are you going to go try to land in the water? I would go land where the Cope Tiger exercises are going on, where you have the most advanced military equipment in the world that can support you when you hit the water, because landing in the ocean is not going to be like landing in the Hudson River with the Sully Sullenberger situation. The moment your wing hits one of these waves, the whole thing's going to spiral and rip to shreds, and probably everybody's going to die. So for whatever reason, this plane flies out into the Straits of Malacca. And we actually think that the last radar communication was not really the last tracking of the plane, because if you look at the time the plane disappeared, when they first reported it, the very same day, they said it was 1840 UTC. This is the same time, around within minutes, where we think the videos are happening in the Nicobar Islands, not in the South Indian Ocean. We think that the videos happen at the exact time and location that this plane supposedly turned into the South Indian Ocean. And there's a final witness there, Catherine T., in that exact location at that exact time, who sees a glowing orange plane consistent with a 777-200 flying low. They've estimated the height and altitude to be 10,000 feet and descending. And when we look at these videos, the plane is also descending in the videos, and it's very low as well. And the glowing orange would be from the halon fire extinguishing devices releasing bromine, which is a halogen gas, due to a chemical reaction of them fighting the fire. One of the things that you're supposed to do is you're supposed to pour water on these batteries. So you can imagine there may be a chemical reaction going on. Bromine is being released throughout the plane, glowing orange gas. And now that's the reason why she's seeing this hazy, glowing orange plane with no navigation lights. Now, why does she have to be discredited? Because her sighting completely destroys the narrative of this plane turning to the South Indian Ocean. And I've talked to pretty much all the internal and independent group investigators, and they all just say we're just going to ignore her sighting, even though it's very well documented in multiple blog posts. She put in an official report when she got into the land. They looked at her automatic GPS and were able to confirm that she was there around the right time. And again, now we've got 19 witnesses that are corroborating a fire event, which makes perfect sense when you've got 487 pounds of dangerous lithium-ion batteries that were not scanned 2 different times and were, quote unquote, physically inspected, whatever that means. But if you go look at the ATSB report to see how they were packaged, it's incredibly unsafe. I mean, they actually just look like improvised explosive devices, and they just stack them up in crates in cardboard boxes, where you're going, if one of these lights up, they're all going to light up. And the lithium-ion batteries don't just go out. It's called runaway lithium-ion battery fire, where they just keep coming back up. Every time you put them out, they come back up again. So this is, in my mind, by far the strongest evidence for what happened to the plane, and actually explains the tiny amounts of debris that we found as well. Now, some of the debris, this plane might have come off. There was even a Mayday call intercepted by the Chinese from the Taiwanese embassy that is reported only in China Times News, supposedly at 2:43 a.m., which in Malaysian local time converts to 18:43 UTC. That was supposedly of the plane, saying on an encrypted communication, saying that the plane was disintegrating and attempting an emergency landing. Now we've got a witness who says that she sees the plane flying low and that she also saw black smoke coming out of it and that it was glowing orange. You've got two videos that show the plane descending, turning left, going south into the east, both with smoke coming out of the back of them. And you've got a Mayday call that corroborates it as well. And I would sit here and ask any of the viewers, anyone listening, that, you know, how many court cases have you seen out there where you've got two videos, you've got an eyewitness testimony, and you've got also an intercepted radio communication, all corroborating the exact same event? So as hard as it is to believe, you know, this uses more evidence than any of the other stories out there to date.
Just a mind-blowing
Crazy,
amount
right?
of
I just
information.
wanted to say real quick that lithium-ion batteries are most unstable when they're first made as well.
Are they?
Yeah, I just throwing that
Yeah,
out there.
I was a project manager for an architecture firm. This was like 25 years ago, and we were doing data centers, and the halon fire extinguishing systems were designed to save equipment servers, not people, because they would immediately deplete the oxygen supply in the room. And if you weren't able to get out immediately, you were pretty much dead not from the fire, but from the fire extinguishing system.
Yeah, I learned that too from one of our data centers, an old job I worked at as well, is that all the oxygen gets sucked out of the room and you would die if you were in there. I forgot about that. That's a good point. I may bring that up in the future. Somebody in the chat wants me to mention the leaker as well. So this is a pretty fun story here, which is that I would say a couple months into this, I'm sitting there and I'm looking at the videos. I'm going, wait, like I've got a pretty good psychological profile for the person who would have leaked these videos if they're real. It's going to be an American personnel. They didn't want to damage national security. This is why they would crop out the information, why they remove the HUD data. Because otherwise, if this is a spy or something like that, you're going to have all the drone HUD data be in there. You're not going to crop it out, you know. And I thought, well, I'm going to look up all the people who've been charged with espionage or willful retention of classified data. And it took me several weeks to find it. I started having to do Google searches with date ranges, and then I run across Lieutenant Commander Edward C. Lynn. I'm 99.9% sure he's the guy that leaked these videos. He is a patriot. We had the highest levels of trust with this guy. He actually, every single article you read about him talks about signals intelligence. And I've been sitting here talking about signals intelligence, how all these assets are communicating, the satellites, the spy planes. There's reports that there were spy planes in the air. And even Catherine T., that witness I was talking about, saw two other planes at cruising altitude. And one of them could have been a U.S. spy plane tracking the plane right there in real time. He might have been on that exact plane. The case against him, heavily obfuscated. They threw like a prostitution charge on there. They had a sting operation done on him where they tried to get him to spill secrets. They tried to claim it was espionage and put him in jail for life, which was like the first case of espionage by an active duty member of the Navy since the Cold War. He was actually part of this special squadron called the VPU-2 Wizards, and the assignment was from February 2014. He gets reassigned March 25th. Which is right after the plane goes missing. The investigation began April 2nd. He gets caught in May with two flight manifests from flight codes that include search and rescue code names. The window of opportunity here is too small. Like he had to be related to this plane. They don't end up charging him until September of 2015. And it would make sense that they waited a year because otherwise people are going to piece together that like this guy is somehow connected to the plane that went missing, right? But here's the real kicker. The defense argued during the court case that the classified information in question is available on the internet. So I would ask you, what are they trying to put somebody in for prison or for life over that's available on the internet? If these videos are real, they would make perfect sense. This is what you would try to put somebody in prison over life over. So they end up forcing him into a plea deal. They basically convinced him that he damaged national security. He may not even have known he was damaging national security. Imagine if you're watching these videos and you have no idea this technology is real and you're a military personnel. you're going to think that's UFOs, and you're going to go, oh, I'm going to show the world that some UFOs orbed the plane, just the same way that, you know, you have the detractors who try to tell me, talk about what my opinion is and saying that the aliens zapped the plane or whatever. You might have just thought he's showing some anomalous event, and he's therefore giving us the least amount of information possible in order to solve the mystery, giving us the coordinates, the satellite designation. He's showing us 2 different videos, so you can't deny that it's real, right? Even though people still do. And so he takes a plea deal for 9 years. 9 years for a plea deal for just 2 counts of dissemination of classified information. That is a huge amount. In fact, we looked at his appeal, and he even argued that it was vastly disproportionate. The judge, they put him in pretrial detainment for 646 days. They wouldn't let him go out. They didn't want him talking to the media or anything like that. But for the reason why he wouldn't be allowed like bail or whatever, the judge says he's a huge, you know, risk to national security. But from everything that they sourced, there's nothing that is all just mundane little things. To even look at the information, his lawyers had to go through a special like classification process just to look at the evidence against him. And then they had to have experts come on to explain why what he did was a huge damaging to national security. All this stuff lines up towards the same thing. And the last thing I'll say is in the appeal as well, the penal codes related to the charges against him are consistent with potentially being related to video evidence. So
Calvin,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, but I'm sitting here thinking, leaking this video, if he never made the claim as to exactly what it was. So if I don't understand how it could be, okay, if was he claiming that it was aliens?
He didn't say anything.
Leaker? He didn't
At
say
least
anything.
There's no public statements that he had put out.
What is it? What is it about? Is it just the fact of the equipment that recorded that was the secret, or was it? It wasn't the content in the video. It was how
he would have had access to it, right? So his position was actually one where he flies on these spy planes, and then and these spy planes fuse this data, onboard data, with other assets as well. So you can imagine on these spy planes, you've got one person looking at the drone camera, you've got another person looking through the Sibir system, and this is how they're tracking the plane in real time on board the spy plane. And these spy planes as well, we found a P-8 Poseidon. Actually, this is something I've been looking at just today. Is somebody pictured one of these P-8s Poseidons with this huge radar dish on the top of it as well. So it even has its own localized radar and cyber attack capabilities on it as well. So it even could have potentially been jamming the signals on board this plane. I mean, it really could have been an espionage scenario. But, you know, his whole specific role, and this was a guy that we trusted with nuclear weapons. He was like a congressional aide for the military at one point, right before this. I mean, we were basically like giving this guy the fast track. Is how much we trusted him. And his role on board these planes was to take the information they were seeing and then shoot it up to leadership and stuff like that. So, you know, he was somebody that we trusted a lot. And even if you read the case about Edward C. Lynn, you'll find that like his family considered him a patriot. Like, just the whole situation makes no sense, right? Especially because it's like in other cases where there's been espionage and things like that, even that Jack Tahara guy who gave away the Ukraine information, they always say what the information is in terms of what the person leaked. In this case, nothing came out about why this guy was being charged with life.
But how do we know it's the same video that he leaked? How do we?
Yeah, and again, we can't know for sure, but I think the biggest thing
that's what I was trying to figure out.
You know, the big thing is if the defense argues that the videos or the evidence and questions available on the internet, I would ask, what else can it be, right? What available information on the internet could warrant a life in prison penalty in terms of what they were trying to get him at, and then a plea deal of 9 years where he got 3 years shaved off because he worked with the NCIS and FBI. So I FOIA'd the NCIS and FBI. Both of them rejected my FOIAs in total. The FBI rejected my FOIA out of privacy concerns. The NCIS rejected it for the interest of national defense and foreign policy, using an Obama-era exemption to FOIAs. They wouldn't give me a single thing about the case. And you think about, why would you not give them a single thing, not even one redacted document? The answer is because they're watching what I'm doing and they know I'm going to be able to piece it together. Any tiny thing you give me, I'm going to find a clue in there that's going to link them to the videos. You know, even the dates.
But to be fair, we don't know. But to be fair, we don't know. We don't know that this video is the one that was leaked by that person who's been sentenced to 9 years in prison.
Yeah, I mean, I leave that for the people who are listening to figure out or whatever. That's why I would say I'm 99.9% sure.
I'm not trying to establish any kind of
I understand.
fact. I'm trying to understand. I didn't realize that.
If we knew for sure, I mean, it would be game over, right? Like if
I
we
was
knew
gonna
for
say
sure, that's absolute proof, right? Like,
that's what I was
and
getting
that's the
at.
thing
Yeah.
too, is like, this is a guy who I've been saying his name on. I've done probably close to 70 podcasts with people like you guys, who I love doing alternative media podcasts with people. I do think that's the future. But I've been saying this guy's name, and he's not coming out to me saying, "Hey, man, stop talking about me. I'm not the guy who did this," right, or any of that stuff. Which is, if he wasn't the guy, that's exactly what I would expect to have happen. So in my mind, there's something weird going on here, and if it's not these videos, like what could be serious enough, right? And that's out there on the internet. Like the thing too is these satellite videos and satellite capabilities are some of the most closely guarded secrets, like right up there with nuclear codes and stuff like that. There was even an incident in September where you guys can look this up. Defense contractor got charged with espionage over stealing, I think it was satellite imagery about Africa, and they were facing the death penalty over that. So it's
because we
pretty
have secret
serious.
bases in Africa.
So these are the types of things that would account for those types of charges and that level of severity. So yes, of course, it's speculative in nature. But if he were to come out, like I've actually publicly on some podcasts said, like, Lieutenant Commander Edward C. Lynn, like, please go to the Inspector General, the Intelligence Community Inspector General, like David Grush did, right? And if he were to come out and say, like, hey, I'm the guy, that would be kind of game over. Now, the reality is, I don't think he's going to do that. First of all, he took a plea deal. So if he talks to the media, the plea deal is probably going to put him back in prison for the rest of his life. The second part of it, he's a patriot. So if he was told that this is not harming national security because this might lead to doomsday weapons, I could see why he'd want to be quiet. And then I think the big thing, and this is the big takeaway I want for people, is how do you keep this information secret? The answer is nobody will believe you if you tell the truth anyway, right? And that's the thing, is that we didn't believe these videos. If he were to come out and say, hey, I leaked these videos, he's going to get crucified in the media. People are going to call him a liar. They're going to say that he's faking it, right? And you got to realize that there's huge pressure to, not for the people that know, to not say anything about it, because they see people like Edward C. Lynn, who gets charged with espionage for life in prison, and they see that how much it just can destroy your life if you say a single word.
Alexei, do you have to head out? Alexei, you said your phone was dying or something, or?
No, I was just letting the people that are watching that I can't reply back to their comments in the YouTube because I'm doing that through my cell phone.
Okay, I didn't want you to get going without me saying thank you. I thought you were having to head out. So
no, I have 30 more minutes, but I
guess my only question is that if it wouldn't break any sort of NDA for him to say that's not the video. Maybe he can't say it is the video, but couldn't he say it's not the video? I mean, why can't he just say that it's not the video?
That's a good point. That's a really good point, honestly. Or here's another one for you: is where's this hoaxer who made these videos? Kim.com put up $100,000 bounty. The Investigate Earth podcast put up another 20,000. They put up 20 or 25,000. I'm going to get it mixed up. They either put up 20 or 25,000, and then another wealthy donor who I know personally, who has run for Congress in the past, put up the other 20 to 25,000. I threw in an extra 5,000 towards the bounty to make it an even $150,000 for someone to come forward to claim to be the hoaxer and bring the proof and the evidence of their source work related to this. I mean, if you made both these videos, these are masterpieces. There's not any discrepancies anywhere. There's no obvious errors in them. Even the debunkers out there are saying, oh, well, it's a VFX that's close but doesn't match, right? Or there's another one where they're saying, oh, it's a 2D cloud picture, which doesn't make any sense because the clouds are moving and evolving naturally in the satellite imagery, and that it would take a 3D rendered environment to get the two angles where you have the one coming down like this and the other one coming from the side on the opposite. Like you'd have to create like a diorama in a 3D environment for that, right? To get that stuff correct and in sync. So if there is this hoaxer out there, they would have all this work on a hard drive from 10 years ago, right? They could get any job at any VFX studio in the whole world that they want. I mean, we've got Jeffrey Ford, who is a VFX expert that worked on Endgame and Captain America Civil War and Spider-Man No Way Home, that says, just to come up with the storyboard and research the assets and put this all together from a CGI perspective would take 4 to 6 months. And, you know, as I said earlier, the telemetry data wasn't even available till a week after this video first emerged. So how is somebody doing this, and why are they not coming forward for 150,000 in any job they want, right? Like Tim Pool would say, oh, they're a Bitcoin billionaire, right? Which is, to me, completely absurd. And a lot of people have falsely claimed, oh, I can make these in a day or whatever. And yet
No.
nobody does, right? And the thing is, like, the people that have tried, a couple people have tried, and they've come up woefully short, including the corridor crew themselves. In fact, it's pretty obvious that the corridor crew tried and realized how bad their recreation was going to be and then just gave up, because in their video, you only see about 5 seconds of it, and it's laughably bad. Like, it looks just totally, totally fake. And that's with them literally being able to copy one video and actually like mirror it as best as they can, right? And that's where you start to realize, like, the more work you put into it, for sure, the first part of it, getting just like, you know, the drone and maybe the plane, you should be able to get that part pretty easily. But then when you start to get all these scientific details that we've been going through, like the pattern of the orbs, the forward-facing gravity engines, the way that they converge at the last second, all these weird, like the blur that we see, these are the things where it starts to become more and more and more effort in order to be able to recreate that. And that's why nobody can really even come close.
No, both Alexei and I don't know about you, Patrick, but Alexei and I have experience with 3D animation work, and it would take humongous amount of computing power and time and effort. You're talking about state level actors, you know.
Yeah, I mean, maybe
And-
you can get the new programs like what Adobe Firefly is doing, or the new AI software like with Midjourney to. You can do the video creation, you can type it in as you want, but I feel like that where we're seeing that at now, that would probably be slower than doing it manually.
It would have to be something like that instead of 3D, some sort of 3D animation, you know, atmosphere.
Yeah,
you know,
it
would just. I mean, I've got one of the best NVIDIA processors there are, and some of the cloud. Just doing clouds is huge. Will bog your computer down for minutes at a time. You know,
yeah, and that's just the rub. Right, is that these videos were made in 2014 as well, if they are fake, or before, right? And that was 10 years ago, right? So using AI now certainly speeds things up, and even just computer processing has advanced a lot in 10 years, right? Imagine trying to do this with a computer that's older than 2014, you know, and using software from before then as well, and not using AI at all, because that predates all commercial AI. To me, I agree that if it is faked somehow, it would have to be state level actors that are pulling it off. You would need a full team. This is not one individual rogue person doing it. And so I do leave that door open. You know, if the United States government wants to come out and say, yeah, we faked this to fake the alien invasion, or they want to say that China faked these videos to implicate us or whatever, I mean, I'll listen. I'm probably not going to believe them. I'm going to match it up with the evidence and see if their stories match up, but I'll at least entertain the notion.
Well, that's been an awesome. My head's spinning a little bit because I didn't expect to get this much information. To be honest with you, I'm going to go back and watch over again. It's my whole outlook, or my whole impression of this event has changed, and I knew it would. I just didn't know how it would change. I didn't know anything about the guys who worked with semiconductors. And I mean, I'll tell you, when I worked in architecture, I was an associate. Okay, this was like 25 years ago, before I started my design build company. We would go on flights. The partner of the architecture firm would fly on a separate plane than the other partner, and they would have me fly out on a separate plane with the drawings. We would take trips to San Francisco. Not all three of us would never fly on the same plane. And that's just an architecture. That's just an architecture firm. Okay. That's just a paranoid architect who owns a firm. He didn't want his firm dying all in one event, you know, and to have 20, that just doesn't even make sense to me logistically. So I don't,
and all sitting next to each other. Yeah.
I had no idea that makes sense, because they probably booked the flights at the same time. But still, just being on the same plane at the same time is just strange. And being involved with semiconductors is strange. All that information. So, oh man, something a lot of food for thought. I appreciate you coming. I hope you'll be willing to come back again. Does anybody else have anything else they want to ask you, Patrick, or?
Not really. I got to head out pretty soon myself, actually.
Yeah, I thought it was getting late. I really appreciate you coming, Ashton. And again, I appreciate you being open to questions, different theories, different takes on it. I'm impressed. That actually impresses me more than anything, that you're willing to talk about different. You have been slandered in a bit that way, because my whole impression was that you were stuck on this one theory, and I'm happy to hear that, to be honest with you. I'm
and
always
I
happy
expected
to
a
hear.
little bit of that. Like
Yeah.
it's when you're talking about stuff like this, I've seen how other people try to come forward with these grandiose claims, and I expected there to be certain levels of tax. I don't know that I expected them to be as harsh as they are. I mean, people literally talk to every podcaster that I go on and try to tell them not to talk to me and stuff like that, which is just very bizarre. But I'm glad that you kept an open mind about it, because I do like to think that I'm just a normal guy, a day-to-day guy, not selling any books or anything like that. I'm just trying to get to the truth of this. And I think my favorite part of this conversation has been with all three of you, Alexei and Patrick and Tony, talking about the science and the implications of it. Because to me, that's the fun part of it. The tragic part of it is that, I do think that no matter how you look at this, these family members are gone, right? They haven't come back. It's 10 years later. I know for a fact that some of the family members have moved on and remarried, so I don't think they're like secretly together or what have you. And I don't know if anyone even could have survived all of this entire scenario. So my heart goes out to them. But the thing that brings me hope is this idea of this advanced technology that maybe could come from these videos being real, that could help change the world.
Yeah, and I guess I have changed my mind a little bit about the my statements in the beginning about the families, because even if some of the talk, that was before I realized that you're open to other theories and other scenarios. Even if the discussion pushes something else to come out, or gets us further down the road, then we've accomplished something, I think. So It makes me feel better about the whole discussion, honestly. So
yeah, maybe they'll find the plane. I don't think it's going to ever happen, because I don't think they'll ever find a plane in the South Indian Ocean. And just to close out, the reason for that is that if they were to find the plane, they would find the black box. And the black box is, unless they completely falsify an entire black box, it's going to show that I think the plane didn't go into the South Indian Ocean, at least not directly the way that they've stated. So sadly, I don't think they're ever going to find it, but if they do, and, dispels all this, then you know what, I'll be happy there as well. I honestly just want to get closure at the end of the day as well.
Well, thank you very much for coming on, and I hope you'll come back sometime. We love having these discussions, and I appreciate you coming.
Yeah. Thanks, Tony. Thanks you, everybody.
All right.
Thanks.
See you guys. If y'all want to hang out for a second,
Yeah.
We'll see you next time.
What you are about to see is a real-life story. The accounts have gone into great detail to give each side's version of this, an exclusive one, we understand. One of the most talked about